So let's see what's going on there. We have the move queen to d5, threatening mate. After the knight took the pawn, I let both engines play without opening book or table base. This is just a variation. I quite want to see what's going on. So black is up a pawn, but black's light squared bishop is a problem piece. So let's see, the knight on c3 is not that sure. Okay, the knight goes back. So now why can't you take on e5? Okay, the knight went back, so there is the move d6 and the bishop can come back. So, but knight takes e5, you kind of have to protect f7, right? So queen e7, but that would hit the knight. And then, or knight, what? Knight to f6? Oh, that's hitting the queen, so if the knight takes, you just take the queen. So the queen has to move. That was the idea, rerouting that knight to f6. Back, first of all, you had to go to d6 to cover f7. And now the knight went back to this square. Material is even. I'd say white has a much better position here. Just because of the pawn on d5. And the things I really want to learn in those positions is how patient those engines are. So let's see, a4 is not possible. What's black's plan? d5? No, d6? I don't know. Yeah, well, d6 is played, but it's not that big of a move as well, because that pawn is just isolated. Okay, the knight wants to go to b6. Maybe you want to go rook a6 now. Rook a6. Okay, bishop there. So that if the knight comes in, then maybe knight to d. Well, the queen takes the pawn. Just took the pawn. So rook b8, most probably. There is nothing wrong with taking a pawn. If there is nothing wrong with taking a pawn, those engines will always do it. Queen has to go to a6, so there. And now let's see how Komodo deals with this. Gave up a pawn for activity of the pieces. Let's see how both engines evaluate this position. So I guess Stockfish is probably better. Yeah, not much, but a bit. What does Komodo say about this position? Probably also an edge to white. White is after all up a pawn. Yeah, but the Komodo thinks it's kind of playable still. So we have 4 on 3 on the king side and 3 on 1 on the queen side. So if Stockfish is able to get rid of the queens, then it should probably be winning. Bishop pair, both engines have those things still, so let's see. I'd probably take the knight. Probably take the knight at some point. a4 is also kind of fine. And then ace a3, that's kind of fine. Well, if the bishop moves, what about a3? Okay, you have to go b3 there. And therefore a3 takes the knight, a3 ignoring it, let's say takes the knight, that would also be probably kind of possible. Maybe a3 and bishop a5, but Komodo goes with something else, goes bishop to g4, hits the queen, queen to d3, so there is no f3 quite yet. Okay, the compensation for the pawn is there, but what to do? Rook to d8 hits the queen. So where's this queen going? Queen to g3, right? Maybe you... Okay, rook there, hits the bishop. Yeah, that's the thing. Komodo got a lot of activity for the rook. I'd not prefer white here, actually. But let's see what Stockfish is pulling up there. The latest development version of it. Let's see what it's saying about the position right now. Yeah. Went back with the evaluation. I'd be quite curious if Komodo is able to hold this. And if it is, the knight e4 is probably kind of good and playable with the... Okay, a3 now, so let's see what the bishop is gonna do. Bishop to a5, but at some point you kind of have to develop that bishop on c1. Maybe bishop g5. Oh no, bishop h6, because there is no knight h5, so you'd have to go knight e8, and then you can put the bishop somewhere else, and it's your turn. So bishop h6, knight e8, and stuff along those lines. No, bishop to h6 wouldn't have worked because of rook in to g4, so therefore we have bishop to e3. So finally Stockfish developed his pieces. Okay, now the knight is gone, but where is this rook? Oh, now the rook can move. Well, the rook could have moved before. Knight to e4, leaving the rook hanging for a second time, but well, the queen is hit and before the knight was attacked. So, but now what's the thing? What's the deal? Knight to d2, check. Oh wow, that's fine. Now you have to give up the bishop. Yeah, Stockfish is up a pawn, but it's a double isolated c pawn. Not sure. I mean, Stockfish is in no danger of losing this. Has to take the knight, of course. There is no other move. Bishop takes d6 and rook d6, rook d2, bishop d2, rook d2. Now the c2 pawn is hanging. So this is covering this, but this rook in enemy territory can get trapped. So what? Okay, queen. If you go queen e3 to hit the rook, there is again a mate threat. And there is no f3, because then the rook would stare at the g2 pawn as well. And if g3, not too certain, so now the bishop is hit. What to do? Now Stockfish has to come up with some tactics, pins the pawn and no, not really attacking it, because the pawn already was defended, so the pawn is pinned, but you have to do something as well. So now queen e3 might be something, and if you take the bishop, I take the rook. Where is this rook going to go? What? Queen h6 covers the rook from there, but now maybe the endgame is fine. Okay, fine. So now rook takes, the pawn is still pinned, the bishop can return, but the rook on d2 survived. Okay, what? Oh, okay, yeah, fine. But this endgame, I'm not sure if it's winning. I mean, it's 3. Maybe it is. I mean, after all, the rook endgame probably isn't. But maybe. I don't even know if a pawn endgame would be winning that. Probably. I mean, the extra pawn isn't that great after all, but it's an extra pawn. So let's just go back to the evaluation again. So let's just see what Stockfish thinks about the position. Says it's close to winning in engine terms. Komodo gives it as even. So now the king attacks the rook. Cannot take the bishop with a fork on b5 because the king would take bishop on b5 as well. Therefore, okay, you go after the a pawn. Rook a5? What? No, the rook is defended by the bishop. Still rook a5. King b6. King b6. Okay, king to b6. So where's this rook going? Probably to attack on f5 or h5 or g5, something along those lines. I mean, you don't really want to go rook h6. I mean, Komodo 10, it's an older engine. Probably a bit weaker than Stockfish. Not probably, a lot weaker than Stockfish. But you don't just destroy a 3-3 engine or 3-2 engine in any case. So f6 has been played. Now the king moves to e1. Okay, king d2, king c1, and king b3 with c4, king c3 and king b4 might be something we're going to see. Okay, first of all, the rook wants to be activated on the b file, black's rook. Let's see, king d2 probably, continuing the journey. So, time-wise, Stockfish is a bit worse, but not too much. Positionally speaking, I mean, white is in no danger of losing this, of course, but winning it is a different kettle of fish. Winning it is just a different kettle of fish. I don't know if this bishop c4 is so good in that kind of way, but or knight f3 for that matter, and move 3 or 4 instead of knight to b5. Okay, now bishop c6 hits the rook. Rook probably attacks on h5, the pawn on h7. At least I'd do that. Well, you don't have to go king c1, king b2, and c4, king c3. You can just go c4 and king c. Okay, now you have to take the other route. What to do? If h6, king b2, and then c4, king c3 will come. And then this king will be quite annoying on the c3 square, looking at the a4 pawn a bit, shilling at it, and shilling at the e4 pawn. So king b2 probably. I don't understand g3 what Stockfish is thinking about. Fine. So where is this? Okay, rook there. But what is g3 actually? What is the move g3 about? Other than putting those pawns and dog squares. I'd go c4 here. King c1 is what Stockfish wants to do, but this is admitting that the position isn't winning probably. So let's again ask Stockfish. Now goes to rook f2. Rook f2, king c1, stuff along those lines. Not sure what to do. Played king f2. Rook f2. And now c4 has been played. The move I wanted to do all along. But anyway, let's just see the okay, now it's really close to winning. So my plan, free routing the king to c3, is what's going to happen. So now the king is there, looking at all directions. The king shields, and now g4, freezing the blacks. King's okay, f5. Well, that's a pawn sacrifice, right? No, it's pinning the pawn. It's pinning that pawn, but it's still losing it. I don't know, I mean, bishop d7, h5, bishop h3, g5. Oh, that's something. He wants to go g4. So still also in the end game, those little tricks are there. So now the pawn will go back. But now the e4 is hanging. That's now winning. That has to be winning. I mean, there is an f pawn. It's currently blockaded. So now you want to do that. I'm not sure how to protect everything. I mean, if you take an e4, yeah, you lose f4, but f5, but You have an E pawn, you have a C pawn. That's quite great. Okay. Rook there. So now h5 and the a4 will be under threat. And the c4 pawn prevents the king to go to b5. Well, I mean, the king is completely boxed in. Even a check with the pawn will do. So now the h-pawn bites the dust, and that's a completely winning endgame. Now you're up 3 pawns. Well, I don't know. The rook has to go passive. But there are still 3 pawns to be pushed. King b4 maybe? King b4? Well, then the king might come in. So maybe something else like king d3 or something. Okay, both engines are on severe time pressure, playing on the increment. Very interesting game, kind of playable for black, all of this. Probably, so the rook goes there, 1 second, 4 seconds. Rook there, exchange of prisoners. No, well, okay, and now, yeah, and now this. Now let's push. Rook takes, and now it's 2 against 1 in this rook endgame. Both engines have like 12 seconds now again. So they kind of played it well. But the a4 pawn also... No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Well, now you can go c4 maybe. c4... At least I'd probably do that. Rook b8. Look there. Now you can check on a5. There was an interesting game which I have blocked between the Monte Carlo tree search version, an aggressive mode of Komodo Dragon 3 versus Deep Rybko 4.1, I think. And no, versus Deep Fritz 14. Yeah, and this was then a draw, but this is not a draw. I mean, there are 3 pawns versus no pawns. Rook h5, rook b or rook back. I don't know. I mean, what is white doing the last moves? Okay, now e4. King up, king c3. No, this pawn will bite the dust anyway. So now rook e1, king there. And this pawn on e4 will shield everything. So if you don't take on c4, you can probably resign if you don't do it. Well, you can put the king on e5 first, but at some point you probably have to take something. Komodo played a very interesting game, sacrificed a lot of stuff. But okay, taking on c4 was, well, it's lost anyway, whatever you do. I think Komodo also sees it. Very, very nice. So rook b5, probably. Oh wow, rook b5. And then king up somewhere and shielding, putting the king. Yeah, that's over. A rook exchange is nothing. King c3 and yeah, now even c5 maybe. King d6, which was my first intention. Yeah, now the rook shields the king and the e-pawn is just marching forward and winning the game. Yeah, first this and now e4, and both pawns are just too much to handle. Okay, I mean, there are always some checks, but it's... one pawn maybe you can hold, but those 2 pawns, it's a bit much for a rook. So, rook there, check. a4, they come in closer. Rook up. a7, check. Check, and now hit the rook. And so square not even. Why don't you go there first? Don't quite understand. Okay, now king there and just push the pawn. No, just go behind the pawn and now push the pawn on e4. That's even better. Yeah, that's lost. That's completely busted. Could have even sacrificed the rook there, but it's completely unnecessary. Now you have just queen and rook, and with 20 seconds plus the increment, that's just basically gone. And it is a very interesting game, a lot of stuff going on there. So yeah, I will make I won't make a short analysis there to this game. I mean, it was... I will look it up, some positions, but I think I understood this game and the ideas behind it. I'm just gonna go through it once again, because I forgot to mention that this was a game I had against Monarch. Play castles, which is also fine. Well, those, yeah, this pawn, but this is playable for black. This is pretty playable for black. Very much a tactical battle there. Now takes with this, and yeah, I mean, at some points, but it was a very good defensive thing, yeah, from this point forward. Yeah, this is something I don't really understand. I mean, after this and that, and then, well, the bishop goes back. Why don't you go, I don't know, covering the pawn, so bishop c6, h5, pawn here, and the rook there, and you lose this pawn for that one. And yeah, black has this g pawn, but it's not really doing much. So yeah, this is just busted. Yeah, okay, the opening was called the Sveshny... What? Oh no, that's not, that's just the current ball position. This was never played before, probably. Most probably. But anyway, the last cup Pelikan Sveshnikov variation, not quite probably the Kalashnikov variation, because the difference is that there is no knight on f6. The way I played it, it transposed to a variation of the Sveshnikov, but still, if you be completely honest, this is the Kalashnikov variation, and now it's the Sveshnikov. But anyway, thanks for watching and see you next time. Ciao.